And by class 5, he was like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited.
Yes.
Like, I know what to expect now. I can do
Yes.
this.
And when I was pushing, he kept like leaning over it. I remember stopping one time and I was like, "Are you sure you want to keep looking?" And he was like, "Yeah, why not?" He's like, "I've seen this before." I'm like, "Okay."
Welcome to the Birth Education Center podcast, hosted by myself, Care Messer, an entrepreneur, birth educator, and doula. My team and I want to help you discover your options in birth and postpartum, how to find your voice, and how to use that voice to navigate our maternal healthcare system. You and your baby are not just a number. This information includes doulas too. Now let's get started. I am so excited today to have Sierra back to tell her birth story, and she even has her little baby on her. If you're watching us on video, you can see this little yummy thing. But Sierra is going to talk to us about her birth story today and also kind of give you a snapshot of what she experienced as real life, because one of the things that we try and prepare our families for in class as doulas is what really goes on in the hospital and what kind of language can be used and situations you may run into. And I think a lot of times families are like, that won't be my experience, but great, I'm glad you covered it. And then sometimes it is their experience. And luckily, because we've covered it, they know how to handle it. And Sierra championed through that. And so that's why I wanted her to really talk to you today, openly and honestly about her birth story, because she did a phenomenal job in remaining autonomous, knowing and understanding what she wanted for her birth and for her baby. And she did a fantastic job. So Sierra, welcome.
Hi.
So let's start with, what kind of worries or fears did you have about birth?
I just was always under the impression that it was the most painful experience of your life and that no one could describe it. It was just always one of those things that your family, like the women in my family, would be like, "Yeah, you'll know. You'll know when you get there. Yeah, you're gonna be begging for all the drugs. You're gonna be, you're gonna be so out of it." I genuinely thought, I was like, I remember thinking as like when I was like 15, like women keep having kids. And I don't know why. And then I remember my mom telling me, because I'd always ask my mom, like, what was my birth like? What was the experience for you? She's like, I don't remember. I was high out of my mind. I don't remember a thing. And I'm just like, oh. She was like, I don't
Wow. Just
remember.
because of the drugs that they gave her at the hospital?
She just said she was in so much pain. She kept asking for more medication and they gave it to her. And then, like, those first moments, she doesn't remember at all. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so I was just like, wow, like I'm just gonna like, and then I try to my delusional self. I was like, okay, well maybe if I'm lucky, they'll do the same thing to me. I won't remember the pain at all, and then I'll just wake up and there's baby there, and we just resume life as normal. And then boom, it's just like she just like the stork really came, and that's it.
Right? It sounds so
Yeah,
simple. Like, why don't we just wake up with a baby between our legs and we're all done?
yeah, yeah. So
Well, then what made you decide, I think I want to do a natural birth? I think I want to be present.
I actually met someone who had done a unmedicated birth and she has 3 kids and she had the intention of unmedicated every time. There were some circumstances where she ended up doing a C-section, but she even did a VBAC unmedicated. And so I just remember being like, wow, like that's so incredible. You really chose to do that. Like you chose that. Because my stepmom did an unmedicated birth, but it wasn't chosen. It was like, oh, you showed up too late. Here you go. Um, and she talks
Yeah,
about
those are fast and furious.
yes, she talks about how traumatic that birth was and how awful it was and all this. So I'm like, okay, like this woman here just talked like she was so empowered and she was so passionate about it. And she was so like, oh yeah, I was upset that I couldn't do my unmedicated birth. And I'm like, never heard that before. Um, and I kind of brushed it off, but it stuck in my mind. And then I met another woman who had 2 unmedicated births, both vaginal, complication free, and she was like, it was the most amazing thing. Um, and I'm like, what water are y'all drinking? Because I've never heard this before. um, and so then after that, I started looking into it, and I just kind of I'm competitive by nature, so I was like, I mean, if they can do it, why can't I do it? And so
Isn't it amazing the power of somebody sharing their birth story?
mhm,
Because as women that have had unmedicated births, they're hesitant a lot of times to share their birth story because they don't want anyone to feel like they have to do it or
Mhm.
shame them into it or make them feel guilty about it, and so they keep it to themselves, but a lot of times that's how people think I should look into that.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's honestly what it did for me. So I started Googling. That's when I actually found you. I was like, I need someone who's gonna like they have the birth classes through the hospital and stuff. And I almost signed up for one, but I was like, I'm probably gonna have so many questions that they can't answer because they don't specialize in this. I'm sure someone there has worked with patients who have had unmedicated births, but I didn't want to take the risk, obviously. Um, and so I looked for a class that would focus on how to mentally prepare if there was a physical preparation, any sort of preparation for an unmedicated birth. And that's what I found you.
Oh, you can tell you're competitive.
Yeah.
Look at that. You're like, where's my mindset? Where's my
Yeah.
training? Good. That's good.
Yeah. So
And you found hypnobirthing
yes.
of all the classes.
Yes. I found so the second woman, she actually said, she was like, I took a hypno class. And I didn't, she just said hypno. So I was like, what? You were like hypnotized? Like I remember being so confused. And again, I just like one ear out the other. And then that was it. And so then whenever I was Googling, and I remember literally typing in Google like natural birth class. And then it would bring up like mixed results. So then it was like unmedicated birth class. And then that's whenever I kind of came across you, just local resources. And yeah, so then I started creeping on your website and I booked class.
I'm okay with you creeping on my website. It got you into class. So, how besides that, how did you prepare for birth? You probably listen to podcasts, watch videos. What did you do?
I was a YouTube fiend. I watched YouTube videos, probably like 2 to 3 hours worth of videos every single day. Whenever I was in the shower,
Wow.
Dante actually bought me I probably wasted a lot of water. Sorry, Earth. Um, I was I would be in the shower and he bought me this little phone prop thing because he was like, "You always have your phone in the shower. You're always watching videos on your phone." So I'm like, "Oh, I could be doing something right now." So especially when I have to wash my hair, it just takes longer, you know. So I just had my little phone propped up in there in this little thing that he bought off of Amazon, and I would just watch videos as I showered, and then I would watch them as I went to bed as I like got ready for bed. Um, and at first it was always unmedicated births. And then I switched into just positive births because I didn't want to give myself the delusion that I didn't want to go in, as we talked about in class, expecting everything to go my way and then be completely just shaken up if something didn't. And so I watched a couple of videos and thanks to the women who did, were vulnerable enough to post these things and share their stories online for those who it didn't go to plan and they ended up with emergency C-sections and that sort of thing because it did normalize it for me.
And we need the balance of everything.
Hmm.
We definitely do. And these weren't like training videos. They were all birth story
Yeah, I was
videos.
just in that.
2 to 3 hours. I can't even imagine how much media you consumed from
Oh yeah,
people. Oh my gosh, that's
it
fantastic.
was bad, but some of them are like birth vlogs where it's like you're watching them give birth, and some of them are like they're just coming back. They have their baby in their arms, kind of like I do, and they're just like, "This was my experience." So it was a mix of both of those.
And you know what's so funny is I have a lot of women who come into class that freaked them out so bad. That's why they came to class because they started watching videos and they were like, there's so much. I don't know where I'm going and how much. And I'm like, I know class will put it in sequential order for you. It'll make it simple. It's not that big of a deal, but they over freak themselves out from YouTube and then they come into class. I'm like, whatever gets you into a class, I'm about that. Like, we just want to calm the fears and normalize what birth is so you can make different choices for what circumstance shows up. So, okay, freaking fantastic. So, let's start with your birth story. Where did it all begin?
Hmm. So it was the night of 4th of July. And I remember I was sitting on the couch with my dog, with one of my dogs. She's absolutely terrified of fireworks. So she's pacing the house, panting. And so I'm just like, okay, come here, come lay down. So I put her under a blanket and that usually chills her out. And then it's like 10:30 at night, 10:45. okay, I'm gonna go get some water, then I'm gonna go to bed. Go to fill up my water bottle in the kitchen, which is like directly behind the couch. And I dropped something and I get down on hands and knees because of course it like rolls underneath the little kitchen cabinet. So I'm like, and Dante's sleeping, so I can't just be like, hey, can you go grab that? um, so get down on my hands and knees because at this point I'm 37 and a half weeks pregnant. So I'm like, slowly get down on my hands and knees, grab it. And I was down there actually for a minute because I couldn't find it. And then as soon as I stood back up, I just feel like this, like, I wouldn't even call it, I mean, I guess it was like a mini gush. And I thought I peed on myself, but it wasn't enough to convince me that I hadn't. So it wasn't like sometimes in the movies, you just see this like waterfall. It wasn't like that. It was just enough to be like, oh, my bladder was probably like half full and I needed to pee. At 37 weeks, that was completely common. So I was like, whatever. um, so I was like, oh man, I guess I did have to pee. I was like, man, I really just peed on myself. I guess I'm gonna take a shower. And so literally take a step and then it's just trickling down my leg. And I remember being like, okay, is that new or is that what just came out? And then I start walking and every step I just feel like more just kind of like gushing. And I was like, oh my God. So then I waddle
I didn't have a bladder that big.
yeah. And so then I waddle into the bathroom, hurry up, put my pants down, and I'm like, this smells like cotton candy. Like not like true cotton candy, but the sweetness of cotton candy, if that makes sense. And I was like,
You're like, "My urine does not
I
smell
know.
like
I was like,
this."
I am not diabetic all of a sudden. This is not it. And yeah, I just remember being like, okay, that's weird. And then I'm like holding my underwear up to the light. Fortunately, they were white with like a little bit of pattern, but overall they were white. So I was just like, okay, if this is clear, then I know what this is. So I'm like holding it up to the light to see, make sure there's no tint of yellow anywhere. And there wasn't. So I was like, oh my gosh. So then I waddle into the bedroom. Of course, it's 4th of July. Most people on 4th of July party, right? I don't. I don't because I was a dog mom first, so my dog is terrified. I usually stay home.
Right?
Dante's birthday is on the 3rd, so he usually celebrates on the 4th with his family. He was here, but he was under the influence and he had literally just laid down maybe 15 minutes before, so he was knocked out. And I mean,
Oh, the timing of
yes.
that is so great.
I'm at the end of the bed shaking his legs because I don't want to get in the bed. I don't want to walk over and drag more stuff along. I've already got a mess to clean. So I'm shaking his legs. He's not waking up. Then I escalate to hitting. I'm just trying to get him up. I'm screaming, Dante, Dante. He's not moving, and I'm like, okay, this might be so
And
long.
he would have thought it was a prank. At that point, he would have been like, "Why are you waking? Yeah, it's a total prank. This is not
And
happening."
so funny you should say that. So I go into the bathroom, and at this point, I just stand in the bathtub because it's still coming. I'm like, uh, I don't want to get in the shower yet because I want to make sure, even though in my head I know this is my water, I still in my head need to make sure. So I just couldn't believe it. I genuinely didn't expect my water to break. No one in my family had that experience, so I I just again, I know we talked about it in class. I was like, this just happens in movies or to people who it it happens in their family. This isn't gonna happen to me. And so, and then especially for my first, I was 2.5 weeks early. I expected to be 2.5 weeks late because I was 2.5 weeks late. So yeah, I was just like, okay, this can't really be happening. I'm dreaming, I'm hallucinating. So I'm standing in the bathtub, and probably about 5 minutes later, I guess I just got fed up and I just started screaming, like at the top of my lungs, screaming his name. And I'm like, if you don't get up right now, your daughter is coming. And then I'm throwing things from the bathroom to hit him off the bed. Then he wakes up and he kind of wakes up. And so then I get out of the bath and I go to my side of the bed and kind of lean over. I'm like, Dante, Dante, your daughter's coming. And I thought he was kind of waking up because he was moving around, and he did, but he was still asleep enough. So he gives me one of those, a head nod. Yeah. And I'm like, did you hear me? Your daughter's coming. He was like, yeah. Turns over, goes to sleep. I'm like, sir. So then I shake him. I'm hitting him. Literally got my crock, just pounding him. Like,
I mean, what do you
yeah,
do?
like I
Like,
need
when you're out, you're out. Like, that is a hard sell for a pregnant
yes.
woman.
So I'm like, and my thing was, because initially my plan was to stay home. And so I was like, oh man, like, do I actually need to wake him up if I'm just going to chill here? Like, I don't know. But because it's the middle of the night, I can't call my doctor's office or whatever. So I'm just like, I don't know what to do. And so that was probably the one moment of panic for me looking back, that I was just like, I don't know what to do. Um, so he gets up. I'm like, we need to go to the hospital. Or I called my doula, and she was like, okay, you probably should go. She said, call your doctor. So I call my doctor's office, but ironically, they don't have an after hours line, which again, is something I should have prepared for in advance. It just automatically says, if you're experiencing something or you need to go to the emergency room. And so I was just like, oh, okay. And so then my doula is like, well, if that's what your doctor advises, then that's what you need to do. I'm like, okay. So that was my moment of panic where, looking back, I will not do that again. But so told Don, he finally gets up and he's all slow and he's like sitting in the bed, just kind of like bobbing. And I'm like, we need to
Poor
go
guy.
to the hospital. And he's just like, for what? Like, my water broke. He's like, okay. And he like just throws some clothes on. I just throw some clothes on. Um, and I drive us to the hospital because he is not
He was under the
I
influence.
um, and we're pulling up to the hospital, and he stops me. He's like, Sierra, wait, are you being for real? I'm like, do you think I would drive to the hospital at midnight for fun? And he's like, I just thought you were messing with me. And he really thought I was pranking him. And I'm like, I'm not that invested. I will never,
Oh, that
I
is
will
so
never, ever do that. It's like, I wouldn't joke about this. He's like, oh my gosh. He's like, oh my gosh, I feel terrible. He's like, I'm not sober. He's like, I'm not sober. We was going to the hospital. He's like, am I going to meet our daughter when I'm still not sober? And so I was like, no, it'll probably take a long time because I'm a first time mom.
And you hadn't had any contraction surges at all yet?
Nothing at all. And
Okay,
so I
just water
expected,
broke.
this was another mistake of mine. I expected to get to the hospital, them confirm that my water broke, confirm that I'm not having contractions, and be like, yeah, you can go home. Because in a lot of the videos I had watched, it was kind of like, it was mixed. Some places did that, some places didn't. So I was like, oh yeah, they're gonna send us home. So I literally, we showed up, we had nothing. I showed up with literally like, I had my purse. My headphones were in my purse, my phone, and my entrance card and my ID. That was it. That's all I had. I didn't have anything. I didn't even bring a water bottle. Like, I had nothing. And so we get there and they're like, all right, we're gonna check you, we're gonna admit you. And I was like, no, we need to go back home. We don't have anything. And you just said I'm only dilated to a one, not even like a one technically. So nothing's happening here. I'm gonna go back home. I'm gonna go to bed. We'll come back when something happens. And they're like, no, we can't. Your water broke. We can't let you go. You're not allowed to leave.
Even though there's no law against that and you could actually sign yourself out and go because you weren't admitted
And I
yet.
should have. And I should have, but I didn't. So I laid in my bed, sobbing hysterically, so sad. And doctor's like, why are you so sad? And I was like, because I didn't get to say bye to the dogs. And we're going to come home with this baby and they're going to be so confused. Yeah, I felt awful. I wanted to come back home. I didn't even get a chance to shower. So I was disgustingly sweaty because here it was probably like 105 that day. So I
Oh, welcome to
I
Texas,
felt
right?
yes, I felt disgusting. All I wanted to do was shower and go to bed. And I was exhausted because the night of the third going into the fourth, I had only slept like 2.5 hours. So that's what I'm running on right now. It's 2.5 hours of sleep. Didn't take a nap at all on the fourth. Nothing. So I was prepared to go home, take a shower, go to sleep. And again, I wasn't experiencing any surges, nothing. No pain, no discomfort, anything. And so then, yeah, it's about 12:30 or 1, and they immediately come in and she's like, I need to give you an IV. And I was like, no, can you at least just do it? She was like, you need to do, you have to do something. And I was like, okay,
And this was the OB?
this was the nurse, and she said the OB said that. And I'm like, okay. I was like, why? And I remember asking why I needed to do it, and I don't remember what her response was. And I said, I don't want an IV. Can you do the saline lock thing? And she was like, yeah, we'll do that. And I was like, okay, that's the one with like the flexible tube or whatever. I actually have a scar from that. But yeah, so we did that. And then it was I kid you not, every 15 minutes, someone was coming in for something. It didn't matter. And this was in the OBED. This wasn't even in labor and delivery yet. And then around 1:30, the OB on call that night comes in and it's like, so, go over when your water broke. And I said, I think it broke around 11:15, 11:30. She was like, okay, we're going to go ahead and start Pitocin. I'm like, no.
Wow, didn't even
Yeah.
ask, just announced what was gonna happen.
Yes. And
Wow.
so I was like, yeah, no, we're not. And she's like, well, can I ask what your reservations are? And I said, well, my goal is to have an unmedicated birth. And my water literally just broke 2 hours ago. I don't need Pitocin. I trust that my body's going to do what it needs to do. And if it doesn't, we can revisit this at a later time. And she was like, okay, well, I'm going to come back and we can discuss it again. And I'm like, okay, cool. She leaves. 2:30, she's back. So have you thought about it? Do you want to go ahead and start? I'm like, no. I meant later as in like later today. Not
Like, tomorrow.
yeah. Like very much later, like in the evening sometime. And she was like, "Oh, yeah, so the problem is because your water's broken, um, you're at risk for infection." And I was like, "Oh, yeah, I know." She's like, "Okay, I just want to make sure you understand." I'm like, "Yeah, I understand. I work in the medical field and I've been reading up on this. I'm very educated on this topic, I know. And I'm not gonna put my baby at risk, so I know." She's like, "Okay, 3:30." She's back. So I think we should really, really start the Pitocin. I'm like, no, like I told you at 2:30, we can do it this evening, potentially if there's a need, but I really want to see what my body does. And she's like, yeah, well, we can have someone come in here and check you. And so they checked me again. I was still at a one, hadn't dilated at all any further. Um, and then she was like, our monitor shows that you're having contractions, but you're saying you're not feeling them. I'm like, no, I don't feel anything. I'm just hanging out here. And she's like, yeah, so that's a little concerning. We want you to progress. So I think we should go ahead and start the Pitocin. And I'm like, I'm going to say this again. I want this birth. So I'm going to go ahead and wait. I understand that I'm not progressing, but research shows that you're allowed to wait about 18 hours before things start getting serious and a serious concern for infection. And I've only been checked twice ever. So we just won't check moving forward until maybe I start feeling contractions and then we can go from there. She's like, oh, I really don't advise that. And, my shift is ending in a couple hours. So I'm like, that's great. So I'll talk to the next OB who comes in, and I remember asking, "When does your shift end exactly?" And she's like, "Well, technically, my shift ends at 7, but we start handover around 6:30." And I said, "Okay, well, you can send the new OB in, and I'll tell her or him the same thing."
You are so clear with your words.
Thank
Phenomenal.
you.
Phenomenal.
Um, so then because they were coming in every 15 minutes or so, we hadn't slept at all. Like not even close. We didn't even have a chance to like close our eyes. Around 4, we moved from the OBED to labor and delivery. They got us in a room. Um, and then same thing. Then we got reintroduced to the labor and delivery staff, but that same OB is still, it's the same floor. So they're still taking care of us. But the nurses were different. So the nurse comes in, doing vitals, getting us all set up, giving us the lay of the land in labor and delivery, all that. I just remember sitting there and they kept adjusting my position because unfortunately they didn't have wireless monitors. And whenever I asked, anytime I would ask to go to the bathroom or anything like that, of course, everything has to come off. And then I have to go to the bathroom and put everything back on. And I remember they were very, very nervous about me using the bathroom. Every time I'd be like, oh, I really need to go pee. And they'd be like, oh, I don't know, your water's broken. So, and I remember it in
What are
class.
you gonna drop a baby, like, out of the toilet over with 1 centimeter dilation
Exactly.
and no
Yeah. And
labor?
I just,
That's crazy. Am I supposed to hold my urine? Like,
they
what?
offered me a catheter. And I was like, no, I can literally go to the bathroom. And I remember saying, I said, I'm only dilated to a 1, which is why the doctor keeps pushing Pitocin on me. This baby's not coming out of a 1. So we're good. Everything's fine.
Wow, that tells you how conditioned they are to all
Mhm.
intervention,
Yeah.
right? We just give people a catheter, we give them the epidural, that's how we do our births.
Yes. And so
Wow, that's telling.
then they were like, "You cannot eat. You cannot eat." And anytime they would leave the room, I'm just inhaling food. I don't care. I'm like, I know I can eat actually. um, so I that was nice because my mom had brought I had given her a list of snacks and she had brought them all. And so
Yay,
yeah, I'm just
mom.
eating my snacks. Um, I will say I'm not not sponsored by them or anything. Lara bars, amazing. And they happened to clean me out in preparation for pushing. So
There we
yeah,
go.
it was nice. The labor and delivery nurse, for that last like 2 to 3 hours was so sweet. I wish I could have had her for the rest of the day, but she got off at 7 too. She was so sweet, so helpful, and she was probably the first experience I had where I was like, okay, she's gonna advocate for me too. She's not gonna just be like, oh, the OB said this, so this is what I'm doing. So that was nice. So yeah, they're still coming in every 15, 20 minutes. We haven't slept at all. I think once shift change happened, there was a delay and I slept for an hour. Still didn't feel any contractions. So at this point it's oh, let me not skip over this. They around 5:30, literally it was about 5:30 to 8:30, her heart rate would like shoot up and then it would drop down and it would shoot up and then it would drop down. Of course, the OB, who's the overnight OB, she keeps telling me, she's like, "Oh, we're about to do shift change, but I'm really worried about this. You know, we're gonna have to take you in for an emergency C-section because this baby is just it's like whatever position you get in, if you move around too much, she is not responding well." And they couldn't pin if it was in line with my contractions or not. Again, I don't feel anything, but the monitor is saying I'm having contractions. So they're like, we can't figure out if it's in line with your contractions. We don't know why her heart rate's doing this. And in my head, again, I'm thinking you're exhausted. You literally have slept 3 hours in the past day and a half, and you are stressed because these people won't leave you alone. And so I told the doctor, I was like, I'm not super concerned about it, but I will like obviously I want to make sure she's okay. So we're keeping the monitoring. I'm not getting up. They want because if I get up, I have to take the monitor off. So I'm keeping the monitoring um and just trying to follow their rules, I guess, in that sense to make sure that the baby's okay. And so in the shift change, I did fall asleep for about an hour because again, I'm just stuck in the bed. I can't do anything. So I did fall asleep for about an hour and they were just coming in looking at the monitor. They weren't like poking or prodding me or anything, which was nice. And then around 11:30 a.m., the new OB came in and she was like, you know, I understand you want an unmedicated birth. We can start. She was like, I would like to start. What did they call it? They didn't say induction. They refused to use that word. It was something else.
Like
Yes,
augmentation, we wanna augment
yes,
it,
yes, yes, yes. And
kinda prod your labor along, that's the word for prodding
yes,
along.
and so she was like, we want to help you, progress because you're still at a 1 and you're not feeling contractions. And she was like, you are having them, but you're not progressing. So we do want to go ahead and consider some form of augmentation. I was like, okay, I'm open to talking about it now because I'm tired of being here. And so we talked about different options. And because of her heart rate scare, I chose Pitocin because that's something that they could easily dial up or down. and it would respond quickly. Whereas if I took they had the oral pill, that was the only other option they had.
Side
Mhm.
Yeah, the oral side attack or miso.
Yes, and so then she did explain that well. She's like, "The only concern with that is if you take that, we can't we can't really do anything."
No reversing
Yeah,
it.
it's just kinda like, it's in there. We have another medication that can stop labor after that, but then again, we're stopping. So it'd just be start, stop, start, stop instead of we can slowly progress things versus slowly decelerate. I'm like, "Okay, we'll do it."
And that's good because you already were well versed on it, but knowing that PIT only has a 15-minute
Mhm.
half-life and we can stop it and restart it if we need to, but it doesn't like side attack just keeps going. There is no stopping
Yeah,
it. Like it's there.
exactly. So I was like,
Yeah.
"Okay, okay, we'll do that." So we started pit and she told me, she was like, "I'm gonna start you really, really low." And I'm like, "Okay, great." So the plan was, and she spelled it out for me. She said, "We're gonna start you at 2 milligrams and then we'll increase point 0.5 every 30 minutes." I'm like, "All right, great."
Good low dose. Yep.
Then so they start the 2 milligrams. And I don't remember at what point I started feeling like crampy and being like, okay, I'm starting to feel stuff. But I remember the monitor was away, like facing away from me. And then the last time the nurse came in and adjusted it, she like turned it towards me, I guess, to like fix the bag hanging up there. And I see that it's on 6. And I'm like, you've only come in here 2 more times since starting it. So you've been just like increasing by 2 every time. So then I got on
Wow,
her.
they weren't expecting you to know that.
So then I got on, I was like, the OB literally said we were going to increase by point 0.5. So how am I at 6 when I started at 2 and you've only come in here 2 other times? I should be at like 3 or 3.5. That's it. Or I should be at 3. And she was like, "Oh, let me go talk to her about that." Like couldn't give me an answer cuz it was her mess up. And then by the time she came back, I was in the pit of it. I was um things progressed very quickly. I was having contractions probably every 10 seconds and they were lasting 30 seconds. And so then I would get, I guess, did I say that backwards? I would have like a 10-second break and then 30 seconds of contraction, 10-second break. So, and it was all back labor. So I had Dante doing counter pressure on my hips just to do something, honestly. I couldn't tell if it helped or not. Since I was having the back labor, he was like, "Well, let me try pushing down on your back since that's where it's coming from." He did that once and I was like, "Don't ever touch me again. Go back to the hips." That was yeah, I just remember being like, "Oh my gosh, no, no, no. That's not it. That's not it at all. We're going to have to go back to the hips." And I remember feeling him, and Dante's a strong guy, like, he's really strong. He goes to the gym regularly, and I just remember him I'm like, "Put like, I need you here. I need you here. Push. Like, I need you here to do this." And I just remember him shaking so much that my body was shaking as well because he wasn't getting a break either. And
It's so much dads do not believe me that you put so much pressure on your arms
yes,
and it's isolating muscles that you just have never used like that before.
yes.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah, he was trembling after a while, but I felt so awful, but then at the same time I was like, I don't care because I feel worse than you do. So we went through that and I started getting really, really lightheaded. I remember feeling so lightheaded and just feeling like I feel like I'm gonna pass out. And I remember I started getting nauseous. And then I remember because of where it was in my back, I couldn't really support like the only position that was even tolerable was me standing and kind of like half bent leaning on the bed. And then he's applying counter pressure. But then it got to a point where like I'm like, I can't even feel my legs anymore. I need you to like support me because I genuinely cannot. So he's trying to like
And your doula wasn't here yet.
mm-mm.
She was still at home?
She had gone to the wrong hospital, and so she was on her way, but I was just like things had progressed so fast, and I remember because we had just talked to her at, like, 12:30, I'm like, "Yeah, I'm a little crampy, nothing too crazy." Um, and I think this was around, like I don't know what time it was, to be honest. Time was flying, but it wasn't.
And they hadn't upped your pit again?
No, 'cause
They, like, kept it at 6?
after she did the 6, I was like, "Yeah, don't touch me. Don't touch this again." I was like, "You can honestly turn this off. We're fine." She did. She turned it off. And so Then from there,
So that just kicked your body into
yeah,
labor.
it was insane. It was so fast. Like within the hour, I was like full blown contractions, 30 seconds on, 10
Your
seconds
body
off.
took
Yeah.
over.
So yeah, I was feeling nauseous. I was like, I can't feel my legs. So my mom's like trying to support me at the same time. My mom's trying to support my upper body to help hold me up while Dante's applying counter pressure. Because I'm like, whatever you do, don't stop. I don't care what you have to do. You better not stop. He's like, how do I do this? And I just hear him mumbling. And I was like, I don't care, Dante. Figure it out. You have to figure it out. I'm in the zone right now. Like, leave me alone. Um, And so I remember being like drenched in sweat, but then also cold at the same time. I just felt like my body was doing so many things at once. It was just hard to keep up. Yeah. And so then I remember like after a contraction, I had like the 10 seconds. Dante was looking at the monitor and he was like, how do you feel? And I was like, I cannot breathe. Like, I just need a second to catch my breath because I was breathing through them well, but it was just, I guess not as well as I had practiced. But it was something that it was just like, I cannot catch my breath. For me, my experience was very true with what I've heard about pit, where there is no incline and then decline. It was just like, you're here and then you're not. um,
Right? Because a Pitocin contraction starts at the top and then goes
yeah.
down, where a natural contraction starts at the bottom and goes up and waves
Mhm.
and then down.
Yes.
Yeah, it is. It's power at the very front, and then you have to get through the rest.
Yes, and so it was just a very interesting experience, and then I just remember not being able to breathe, and I remember just being like I broke down crying, and I was like, I need something because I cannot breathe. I can't breathe, and I can't keep going like this because 'cause I'm gonna pass out." Like, I remember losing my vision and being like, "I can't even see anymore. Like, I cannot breathe. I'm gonna pass out." And I have asthma already. And so usually I actually had my inhaler in the bag that I planned on bringing to the hospital. But because I did not bring that bag because I expected to go back home, I didn't have that. So I was just like, I just need to be able to breathe. I don't care what they do to me now. I need a second to breathe. And so um they asked, they're like, do you want to try an epidural? I was like, yeah, that's fine. And then my doula got there and she was like, have you guys checked her to see if she can even if like the epidural's worth it? And I remember them saying, like, oh no, but she wants the epidural. And she asked me, she's like, do you want it? I was like, yes. I just need something that's going to let me breathe. I don't care what it is at this point. So get the
You were
epidural.
probably in transition, weren't you?
Yes, yes, I was. I was. Because as soon as I get the epidural, maybe 15 minutes later, the anesthesiologist like, "Oh yeah, you shouldn't feel anything, blah blah blah. Or you might feel this." And I'm like, "I feel normal. I feel completely normal." And I'm still feeling. They stopped the pit at this point, so my contractions were nowhere near what they were. But I'm like, I still feel everything. So, and I remember asking her, like, how does this work again? Like, because again, and my mom was like, I don't think it's working because I didn't feel anything. And I was just like, okay, so what am I supposed to feel and not feel? I'm so confused. What is the point of this thing? And so I remember at 3:30, because 3:30 is when I started pushing. So I was laying down. They were like, here, lay down. We're gonna check you. And as soon as I laid down, I was like, I need to push. And they were like, "What do you mean?" And I was like, "I need to push. I need to push." And they were like,
The epidural's not working because I can feel it and am
yeah, I was
pushing.
like, I need to push." And they're like, "Are you sure?" And I was like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Okay, we're still gonna check you." And then I'm like, "Okay." And so I'm laying back and they're like, "Oh yeah, yeah, you're ready. You can start pushing." That's what happened. I got that. I maybe had the epidural for 20 minutes, but I mean, it hadn't done anything. And I just started pushing. I was so exhausted. That pushing took 2 hours. I was falling asleep, and it was funny. I remember feeling it. I remember feeling like they'd be like, "Okay, okay, you feel your contraction?" I'm like, "Yep, it's coming. I have another one coming." And it got to a point like I'm telling them, "Okay, I have another one coming. I'm about to push." And so I'm pushing, and then as soon as a contraction went, I would literally just like collapse back and fall. I would actually fall asleep for like the 30 seconds or whatever. And I never
Right? You're like, "I need a
yeah.
time. I need some I need some
And I
sleep."
just remember like feeling my body like immediately go limp as soon as the contraction. And I've never done that in my life, been able to fall asleep so fast. I usually struggle to fall asleep, but not then. And so
Fantastic. It knew it needed it.
yes. So at this point, the labor and delivery nurse is in there. The OB hasn't been back in since we started the pit. And I'm pushing, I'm pushing. I asked for a mirror, which was super helpful for me. Asked for a mirror, and I can see her head and all her hair. and and so that was exciting. But I was so exhausted that I could tell, and then I was getting defeated because I could tell that I'm not pushing hard enough to really make progress. And I just remember feeling like, oh, I'm so tired. I'm pushing as hard as I can, but I know it's not strong enough for to get her head out right now. And so I was like, okay, I'm just gonna rest through like I'm just gonna rest. And they're like, okay, tell us when you feel your next contraction. I didn't tell them for like 2 or 3 contractions. I'm like, yeah, no, I'm just gonna chill here for a second 'cause I'm exhausted.
Which you can totally do and let her sit there and stretch everything
Yes,
out.
so that's what I did. And then I was like, okay, here comes one. Here comes one. I had built up enough energy and I had pushed. And I remember my mom being like, oh my gosh, here she comes. And the doula and Dante, they're just so excited. Here she comes. Here she comes. Her head's coming out. And I was like, oh, there's her little forehead. And I wasn't looking at the mirror at this point. So I don't know how far she was out. But I just remember um the nurse, the post or the delivery nurse being like, okay. And she has her hands on me the entire time. And I'm not really paying attention to what she's doing, honestly. I'm just trying to get this baby out. And then I feel like this weird sense of pressure, but again, I'm not looking at the mirror, so I'm like, oh, her head must be like at like the peak coming out, like okay. And then she's like, I have to grab the OB. So she runs out, grabs the OB. OB, comes in, puts on her gloves, her gown, all that. And then she's like, okay, here we go. And then the mirror is back again. And it's like, I've done nothing. Like, it's like, I still see like just the top little portion of her head. I'm like, and then the OB's like, oh yeah, she has a lot of hair. I see the top of her head. And I'm like, in the moment, I'm like, that's weird. I swear my mom said she saw her forehead, but I can't trust myself at that point because I'm so tired. I'm like, I probably just made that up. Whatever. Here we go. So then I'm pushing again. So after 2 hours of pushing, she's here. And she did, I will say, she came out in one push in the sense that once her head was out, her whole body came out at once. It wasn't like, oh, her head and then her shoulders and then her body. It was her whole body came out as soon as she came out. But what I learned later was the nurse pushed her back in, and then the OB came and did this like triangular movement, just like basically like popped her head out whenever I was pushing. So I did have a second-degree tear, which I was very upset about. But yeah, that was probably the worst part because I felt the tear. That was the worst part of labor for me by far. And so, yeah, that was basically it. And then after that, they put her on my stomach. Her umbilical cord was short, so she couldn't come all the way up to my chest. And I remember being so exhausted and then having to advocate for myself once again because they were like, "Okay, we haven't noted that you wanted delayed cord clamping." And I was like, "Yes, but I said specifically wait until white." And she was like, "Okay, well."
Good for you. Your words are
She
clear.
said, "Thank you." She said, "Okay, well, we usually wait 30 seconds." And I just remember laying there being like completely out of it. But I just remember being like, if it's white at 30 seconds, I don't care. It just needs to be white. And she was like, okay. And at that point, I think the doula and Dante could tell, like, okay, this is our time to step in and make sure this is done. Cause I'm like, leaned back, just completely. I was like, I just need to get that out and I'm going to pass out until my baby's up on me. Um, and I remember I looked down at her and she cried a little, like she cried enough for them to not be concerned, but she wasn't like, it was like as soon as she was on me, she was fine. And it was the craziest thing. I just remember being like, wow, she really knows me inside and out. Like, this is so crazy. And she just laid there. And I just remember like, okay, she's here. I put my hand on her, just laid back and just laid there until everything was done. They cut the cord, and then she came up on my chest, and she literally she just laid there. She didn't cry anymore. It was just so peaceful. They really did respect our golden hour, which was so nice. And then they got her weight, did a couple things, and then I told them that Dante needed a golden hour as well, and they let us do that. So we each got our own golden hour, which was nice.
So great. Did you sleep through his?
Um, no, because they came in and that's when they were doing all the pushing on my belly and all that. So I did not, but it was nice to see, like it was nice to get to see him in those moments. And I think I took a few pictures. Like I was laying in the bed taking pictures of them on the couch. Um, but yeah,
He was really looking forward to that. He talked a lot about that at the end of
yes,
class.
and he made that was the one thing I was like, "Okay, so you've been quiet this whole time, but now when she's here," he's like, yeah, so when do I get my hour with her? Um, I just wanna make sure that's clear that, she's gonna get her hour, and anybody who came in, anyone, he was like, "Yeah, so just so you know, I'm getting an hour too, just to let you know." And I'm like, "Now you wanna advocate for somebody."
Oh, I love it. Well, he was sober finally.
Yes, he was, he was. He had gotten a little bit of sleep, so but I know he was exhausted. He was probably just as exhausted as I was.
I bet he was beat
Yeah, I
up.
felt I felt so bad. I was like, "Get some water, get some coffee." Yeah, so she was born on July 5th at 5:20, and I was like, "Okay." So I really only had, like, 5.5 hours of active labor, which wasn't bad to me for my first kid, so I was like, "Alright, we can do this again." Um,
Right? And next time we can do it at home where nobody bugs me and I can just slide that baby out in water, not think about
yes.
it.
I was like, "You remember why I said I wanted to do a birthing center? This is why." Um, and I think he still is very much he still is on team hospital side, but he's more so like open to it now. Um, because postpartum was really rough on us in the hospital. Um, we had a postpartum nurse who was not very her bedside manner was just not it. And she she put a lot of fears in our head, especially mine. And of course, I'm already exhausted. And she just made me feel inadequate as a new mom. Like I wasn't doing a good job taking care of my baby already. And so I just remember really struggling in the hospital postpartum. I was so ready to go home. But just like in I think it was worse postpartum, there was someone in the room, like, every 10 minutes, and whether it was, like, the admissions people, the records people, the billing people, the people for the
The
bank. Yeah,
photographer.
the photographer, I didn't even know that was a thing, and she came in, and I'm like, "Do you see me? I'm, like, naked in a diaper, so is the baby, and Dante's over here knocked out. What? Why are you here? Who wants a picture right now? Like, what are you doing?" And so
And how much do you wanna charge me for that? Absolutely
yeah.
not. We have our own iPhones. We're
I
good.
was just like, "What in the world?" Which we actually ironically, we did get some of the photos, but I it was mainly the ones with him and her because those he looks presentable. I did not. So I was just like, "Okay." Um, so
I'm sorry the postpartum nurse made you feel inadequate.
uh,
I have heard that a few times, and that's the time when you need to be built up and shown things if you don't know what you're doing,
yes, it
right?
was
I'm so sorry.
it was surrounding breastfeeding, which was also tough because I'm the first person, I don't wanna say in my family, but in my immediate family that has breastfed. My mom, my stepmom, they didn't do that, which is fine. But that's something I wanted to do, and I didn't really have that community, that unit, and your advice in class was to find a support group. I have literally searched high and low for a breastfeeding support group in our area, and I can't find anything. And so I was just like, okay, we're just gonna hope for the best. Unfortunately, Dante's sister breastfed her kids, so I was able to talk with her, and she's kind of like who talked me off the ledge when we got out of the hospital because yeah, the postpartum nurse was like, "Yeah, so how are you going to feed your baby because you're not producing enough?" And I'm like, um,
Because my milk hasn't come in yet, because it doesn't come in for 3 to 5
yeah. And I was
days.
just like, well, I was like, I want to breastfeed, but if I can't, then we already have cans of formula just in case my milk doesn't come in or it comes in slower. And I remember telling her vividly, I was like, I'm not going to starve my baby. I'm not going to starve my baby. I'm not one of those people who's just like, no matter what, she will be breastfed. I'm not that person. So yeah, I remember telling her that, and she kind of left it alone. And then in the middle of the night, our second, because of when she was born, we had to stay 2 nights. And so the second night, the middle of the night, Dante's asleep, and she comes in. She gets my vitals, gets the baby's vitals, and takes the baby's weight. And she's like, "Oh yeah, the baby has lost weight. You're not feeding her enough. We need to go ahead and go get her some formula." She was like, I'll be back with some formula." And I was like, "Oh, can is there any donor's milk perhaps? Like, is that an option?" She was like, "I mean, yeah. I just don't I just don't know why you would want donor's milk here if you're not going to be, because donor's milk is expensive. It's hard to access when you're out of the hospital. So I just wanted to start her on formula. So since that's what she's going to be on." And I was um, like I said, I have formula at the house. Can we do donor's milk here? And hopefully my milk supply will come in and I'll get more by the time we go home, or even just like a few days after we go home, because we have formula to sustain her if that's not the case. And she's like, "Yeah, I just want to make sure, that you're feeding your baby." And so then she leaves the room and I just break down. I just feel awful, absolutely terrible. I don't want to wake Dante up because this is the first time he's gone to sleep. So I'm like, "Oh, okay." And I texted my mom because my mom works overnights. And so she's at her hospital overnight. I texted her and I'm just like, "Oh my God, mom, I don't know what to do. I just feel like crap. I don't think I'm gonna be able to breastfeed. This nurse is telling me like I'm not producing enough and all this stuff." And my mom immediately is just a lot of explicit language being used. And she's like, "I need to know her name. I have the number to this hospital. I'm calling immediately. I'm gonna speak with the charge nurse." She's going crazy. And then probably about 10, or when she brings the formula in, she apologizes. And so then I text my mom on the side. I'm like, "Did you already call her boss, like her nurse, like her charge nurse?" She's like, "No, I haven't called yet. I was about to step out and do that." I'm like, "Don't worry about it. She just came in and apologized." But she came in, she apologized, was just like, "I'm sorry. I'm really frustrated." She's like, "I shouldn't have taken my frustration out on you and my concerns." She's like, "I've seen it time and time again where moms are those moms that are like, I'm not going to feed my baby anything but breast milk." And she sees these babies like health decline. And I'm like, "Okay, I understand that, but I told you twice I'm not that person and I'm not going to do that. I literally have formula at the house for this purpose. So I'm not that person." But I was like, and I told her, I said, "You just made me feel like crap, basically. Like, you made me feel awful." And she apologized. And I just told myself, "You know what? We leave tomorrow. So it is what it is. Like, I'm not going to go through the process of requesting a whole new nurse and all this stuff. We're leaving in like 12 hours."
Right.
Um,
And you told her how you felt, so maybe next time she'll think ahead of time before she speaks, especially when she is hearing what she wants to hear from the mom. She might have not believed it, but she was hearing from you, "I'm not that person."
yeah. So that was probably the worst part of postpartum in the hospital. Um, And then Sunday, we got to come home, and that was magical. I was like, "Oh, thank God." Um,
The dogs are home. I'm
I know.
home.
And I immediately like went to the dogs. Dante carried the car seat in. And I'm like, "Okay, I need to go say hi to the dogs." Like, I just felt so bad. And so yeah, I went and hugged on them a little bit. And of course, my mom had brought hospital blankets home multiple times. Um, and so they had kind of gotten used to the scent, but not really. And so then they smell me, and I am a walking hospital at that point. And so they're just like all over me, trying to be like, what is going on?" um, but yeah, they've done well. The adjustment has honestly been smooth, which has been nice. So
And I know your milk came in because you're still nursing
yes,
this little
yes,
girl.
it did. We've honestly been kind of combo feeding because um just like from what I've learned from her grandma, from Dante's mom, she is following his eating patterns as a kid, and she likes to nurse every hour to every hour and a half. So Yeah, so that's what we're doing. So at night, I was doing formula because I was like, I need more than an hour. I need more than an hour. I'm not going to survive. It's still super hot here in Texas. And she, just as I, are very hot bodied and she does not like being sweaty in nursing and she will refuse. So usually when we're out and about, I'll give her a bottle of formula, or if I've pumped milk and I can bring that, then I'll do that. But yeah, my milk came in just fine. Um, and so
'Cause it
yeah,
does.
I would love to go back to that nurse and say some things.
And I understand they mean well. However, our milk supply is no our hormone shift comes in 3 to 5 days later, and we're out of the hospital by then. And the colostrum is what is meant to go in as that golden yummy stuff to seal their gut and get things going, like and also when you have had, your epidural and the Pitocin and stuff like that, they've pumped you full of fluids. So not only are you losing fluids, so is baby. So yeah, her weight's gonna go down because she's losing water weight. Right? So, yes, that's gonna be an adjustment, but no one's talking about that either. They're just like, "Baby's losing her weight."
Yeah, exactly. And I remember telling her that. I said, "I did have an epidural." She was like, "Okay." I was like, "Oh, okay."
Like, that means nothing to me right
Yeah.
now. Everybody has an epidural.
Yeah. I will say after the whole experience, I remember feeling, and I think you and I talked about it, I feel very confident going into my next birth, even if, again, even if I'm not able to have a birth vaginally or things, go awry for any reason, I feel a lot more confident going in because I know now that I was definitely in transition during that time, and I will not go to the hospital when my water breaks because I that's honestly what did it for me. Was I was so exhausted and my body just had no more energy to give because I was running on those 3 hours of sleep over 2 days. So, I was like, "Yeah, no, we will be staying at home. We will be sleeping," because I think I just couldn't give my body just didn't have the energy at that point.
It's funny because with the words that you have used throughout your whole birth story and what you used with staff, the confidence level and the clarity level, it's very rare to have that on a first-time mom. And you were well versed in knowing, "I'm gonna stand up for myself, and I'm gonna have a conversation. I'm not gonna." You didn't fight. You were very, controlled with your emotions, especially being that tired, and just explaining, "No, here's why I'm doing this, and I'm not going to do it." And then you ended the
Yeah.
sentence. And then they can come back in every hour if they want to, but, your confidence level already is really good. Next time, I don't even know how you're even gonna bump that up. So, I'm very
Thank
impressed
you.
that you
Honestly,
were that.
it was genuinely your class because I really, really, really do not think I know I would not have been that prepared or able to go in so confidently. We had Dante's little Bible that we studied after, and um
He took notes, you guys. He took notes like no other. I'm like, "Is he?" But now he was not even sober to read them. That's what's funny.
exactly.
But you gotta, you prepped a little bit ahead of time with that.
Yes, so we had his Bible of notes, and then we had all the packets that we had printed out, and so I had been looking over those just periodically and going back on the website and watching some of the videos that were posted just kind of refresh my memory for things that I knew I wouldn't necessarily remember, like when it came to like vitamin K, Hep B shots, all those things, all the postpartum things actually I was very like with her, I was very, very prepared for and remembered well. It was more so like, hey, just so you know, this may be some language you hear in the hospital. This is what they mean. Or, don't let them pull up the tray table with the towel over it and just subtly, give you an episiotomy or something. Like, and so it was those things that I needed to review and refresh on before labor, which was fortunately, I had been doing because if I hadn't been, then I would have been out of luck. But yeah,
Yeah, you definitely were your best advocate.
yes. Hopefully, next time it'll just be. I think it. I genuinely believe it will. It'll be a lot smoother next time, even if it's not vaginal. My mindset and my energy will be a lot better because I'll have rested.
Girl, it's gonna be
Yeah,
faster. Second babies literally slide out. So Fast and Furious may be the birth story next
yeah,
time. So prepare to catch that baby.
yeah. Yeah, that would be crazy.
Well, and was there anything that Dante wanted you to express of what he got out of the experience or took from class? Because I know you guys had talked about that.
I remember him. We talked about just like the value of the class, and he was just like, "Yeah, I would have been so lost in there." And I remember in the hospital, he's like, "Do you want to try this position? Because Care said," and I'm like, "Just keep doing the counter pressure." And so I know that he did pull a lot from the class. I think he might have been able to do a little bit more had he not been completely inebriated going into the hospital.
Pretty sure of
Yeah.
that, yes.
But he did sober up. The adrenaline did sober him up pretty quickly. But yeah, I think his thing was just for the or the partners in general to just be very present. And looking back, he was like, he wishes he would have advocated more for me instead of leaving it for me to do. But early on, I didn't mind. And he did advocate for me whenever I literally couldn't because I was in the middle of a contraction or something. He was asking questions and he was forcing them to stop and wait until I was through a contraction, because they would come in and they would try to talk to me as I'm mid contraction. Obviously, I'm not listening, but they're talking at me as if I am. And so he would make them be like, "Hey, hold on, wait a second." And he would finish what we were doing, and then he's like, "Okay, okay, babe, they're trying to tell you something, or they're trying to ask you something." And so I think that was really helpful. But I think the class overall just made him very confident as well in in what to expect in the experience, even though obviously it didn't go exactly to plan. But
Yeah, and I remember when he first came into class, he was just like, "Yeah, I'm here. I'm doing it." And he had his head down kinda like that, and I'm all, "We're gonna see a lot of vaginas, and they're not the kind you were raised
yeah,
with. We're gonna see a lot of that." And he was like, "Okay." And by class 5, he was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so excited.
yes,
Like, I know what to expect now. I can do
yes.
this."
And when I was pushing, he kept like leaning over, and I remember stopping one time, and I was like, "Are you sure you want to keep looking?" And he was like, "Yeah, why not?" He's like, "I've seen this before." I'm like, "Okay."
I love him so much. He's so great. Well, thank you so much for sharing your birth story today. I hope what the listeners take from this is you always have a voice. You are always in charge. Even with an inebriated husband, you can do this and listen to your body. Like you knew exactly where you were and when to stop and start and do all the things. And that innate listening and the fact that you were listening to it is phenomenal.
Thank
Absolutely
you.
phenomenal. All right, we will see everybody else next week. Thanks for joining us today. And remember, it's your body, your choice, and finding your voice is your power. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us in all the places, and go to birtheducationcenter.com for our blog and more online education classes. And we'll see you next week.